Marcus Chen wiped the sweat from his forehead as he adjusted the mining scanner's frequency. The remote asteroid belt of Kepler 442 was supposed to be rich in rare minerals, but 3 weeks of solo prospecting had yielded nothing but dust and disappointment. His small ship, the Wanderer, drifted silently through the void between two massive rocks that had probably been a planet once, millions of years ago. The scanner's ping echoed through his helmet comm, but this time it wasn't picking up platinum or lithium. The signature was organic, large, and moving. "What the hell?" Marcus muttered, checking his readings twice. According to the scanner, something the size of a small shuttle was alive out here, somewhere in the shadow of the larger asteroid. That was impossible. Nothing could survive in the vacuum of space without a suit or ship. He maneuvered the Wanderer closer, following the faint biosignature. As he rounded the asteroid's cratered surface, his headlights illuminated something that made him question his sanity. It was a dragon. Not the mythical creatures from old Earth legends, but close enough that his brain immediately made the connection. The creature was easily 30 meters long, with iridescent scales that shifted from deep purple to silver in his ship's lights. 4 powerful limbs ended in claws that could probably tear through his hull like paper. Most striking were the wings. Massive, translucent membranes stretched between bone-like supports that seemed to shimmer with their own internal light. But something was wrong. The dragon wasn't moving with the fluid grace he would have expected from such a magnificent creature. Instead, it seemed to be struggling, its movements jerky and desperate. One wing appeared to be caught under a chunk of debris, and Marcus could see what looked like wounds along its flank. More importantly, the creature's abdomen was severely distended. Even with his limited knowledge of alien biology, Marcus recognized the signs. This dragon was pregnant, and from the way she was moving, she was in labor. "Jesus Christ," Marcus whispered. He'd heard stories about the Draconis species, ancient, intelligent beings that could somehow survive in the vacuum of space. They were supposed to be extinct, wiped out in some galactic war before humans had even developed faster-than-light travel. Yet here was one, alone and suffering. Every rational part of his mind told him to back away. Dragons, even injured ones, were dangerous beyond imagination. Their scales could deflect military-grade weapons, and they possessed intelligence that rivaled or exceeded human capabilities. This was none of his business, but Marcus had never been particularly rational. It was why he was out here alone, chasing mineral deposits instead of working a safe corporate job back on Earth. And looking at the creature's obvious distress, he couldn't just fly away. He opened a broad-spectrum communication channel, cycling through various frequencies. The universal translator in his ship was top of the line, designed to handle first contact situations. "Hello," he broadcast. "I'm human. I can see you're hurt. Do you need help?" For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, a voice filled his cockpit, ancient, melodious, and tinged with pain. "Human," the dragon replied, the translator rendering her words in accented but clear English. "You should flee. This is not your concern." "Maybe not," Marcus admitted, "but I'm not in the habit of leaving pregnant mothers to suffer alone. Can I help you?" There was another pause, and he could see the dragon's great head turning toward his ship. Her eyes were like stars, literally glowing with an inner fire that seemed to pierce right through him. "Why would you risk yourself for one of my kind? Your species knows nothing of the Draconis." "I know enough," Marcus said, slowly bringing his ship closer. "I know you're in pain, and I know something's wrong with your wing. That debris looks heavy." The dragon, for Marcus was now certain it was female, let out what might have been a laugh or a sob. "The irony is not lost on me. The first Draconis to bear young in 3 centuries, and I am trapped here like a common asteroid miner." 3 centuries. Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold of space. "You're the last of your kind?" I am Valeria, last daughter of the High Peaks clan, and these will be the last young of the Draconis bloodline." Her voice carried a weight of sorrow that made Marcus's chest tight. "The debris struck me during a solar storm. I sought shelter here, but the labor began sooner than expected." Marcus was already moving, engaging his ship's manipulator arms. "Hang on, Valeria. Let me get that rock off your wing." "Human, you do not understand." "Marcus," he interrupted. "My name is Marcus, and I understand plenty. You're hurt, you're having babies, and you need help. Everything else we can figure out later." The manipulator arms were designed for handling mining equipment, but Marcus had always been good with precision work. He carefully positioned the clamps around the debris, a chunk of nickel iron the size of a small car, and began to lift. Valeria's wing came free with a shower of crystalline particles that looked suspiciously like blood. The wing itself was torn in several places, the membrane showing ragged holes where space debris had punctured it. "Thank you," Valeria said, flexing the injured wing carefully. "But there is still the matter of—" Her words cut off in what was unmistakably a contraction. "The babies," Marcus finished. "Right. Do you have somewhere safe to give birth? My ship isn't exactly equipped for this." Valeria's glowing eyes fixed on him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "You continue to surprise me, Marcus of Earth. There is a hollow in the asteroid below us, carved by my people long ago as a way station. But I cannot fit through the entrance with my wings in this condition." Marcus looked at the asteroid's surface and spotted what she meant. A perfectly circular opening about 10 meters across, big enough for his ship, but not for a 30-meter dragon with injured wings. "Can you fold them tighter?" "Not without risking further damage to the membranes, and in my current state—" Another contraction hit her, stronger this time. Marcus made a decision that would have terrified him if he'd had time to think about it. "Okay, new plan. I'm going to take my ship down into that hollow and set up a temporary shelter with my emergency life support. You can give birth in vacuum. I've heard Draconis can survive in space, but the babies might need atmosphere." "Marcus, this is madness. Young Draconis are volatile. If they perceive you as a threat—" "Then you'll tell them I'm not," Marcus said firmly, already beginning his descent into the hollow. "Look, Valeria, I don't know much about your people, but I know about births. Sometimes you need help, and sometimes you have to trust strangers. Right now, I'm the only stranger available." The hollow was larger than it had appeared from outside, easily 100 meters across and roughly cylindrical. Marcus could see tool marks on the walls. This place had definitely been carved deliberately. He set the Wanderer down on the smoothest section of floor and began deploying his emergency habitat. The inflatable shelter was designed to house 4 humans for up to a month, with its own atmosphere processor and basic medical equipment. It wasn't much, but it would have to do. Above him, he could see Valeria maneuvering carefully into the hollow, her movements becoming increasingly labored. By the time the habitat was pressurized and ready, she was clearly in active labor. Marcus suited up and made his way to the habitat's entrance. Through the transparent aluminum windows, he could see Valeria settling herself as best she could in the confined space. Her breathing was rapid and shallow, and the glow from her eyes had intensified. "How are you doing?" he called through the comm system. "The young are coming," Valeria replied, strain evident in her voice. "Marcus, I must tell you something. Draconis births are unusual. The young emerge with basic intelligence already formed. They will be aware from the moment they hatch, and they will imprint on the first suitable entity they encounter." "Imprint?" "Bond. Choose a lifelong companion and protector. Usually this would be their mother, but in circumstances like these—" She trailed off as another contraction racked her body. "You're worried they'll imprint on me," Marcus realized. "It has never happened between our species before. I do not know what the consequences might be." Marcus watched through the window as Valeria's body began to glow more brightly, and he could see movement beneath her scales. Well, we're about to find out. Just focus on bringing them safely into the world. What followed was unlike anything Marcus had ever witnessed. Valeria's entire body seemed to pulse with light, and the temperature sensors in the habitat began climbing despite the life support systems. He could hear her calling out in what might have been her native language, a series of musical tones that seemed to resonate in his bones. Then suddenly, there was silence. Marcus pressed himself against the window, trying to see what was happening. Valeria had gone very still, her breathing shallow but regular. At first, he thought something had gone wrong. Then he saw them. Two small forms, no bigger than house cats, were moving near Valeria's belly. They were clearly dragons in miniature, with the same iridescent scales and general body structure, but their proportions were different. Larger heads, shorter necks, and wings that were folded tight against their bodies. As Marcus watched, both young dragons lifted their heads and looked around with obvious intelligence. Their eyes glowed with the same inner fire as their mother's, but the light was softer, more curious than commanding. One of them, slightly larger than the other, turned its head directly toward the habitat window and met Marcus's gaze through his helmet visor. Time seemed to freeze. The young dragon's eyes widened, and Marcus felt something shift in the air around him. It was as if the universe had suddenly realigned itself, putting him at the center of something vast and significant. The smaller dragon noticed where its sibling was looking and turned to stare at Marcus as well. The feeling intensified, a sensation of being weighed, measured, and somehow found worthy. "Oh no," Valeria whispered, and Marcus could hear the mix of wonder and concern in her voice. "It has happened. They have chosen." The larger young dragon moved away from its mother, approaching the habitat with surprising coordination for something that had been born only minutes ago. Its sibling followed, both of them maintaining eye contact with Marcus through the window. "Valeria," Marcus said slowly, "what exactly does this mean?" "It means, Marcus of Earth, that you are no longer simply a human who happened upon us. My children have named you their bonded protector. In the old traditions, this would make you their guardian until they come of age, responsible for their safety, their education, and their introduction to the wider universe." Marcus stared at the two young dragons, who seemed to be waiting patiently for him to acknowledge their choice. The larger one had placed one small claw against the habitat wall, as if trying to reach through to him. "And if I accept this bond? Then you become part of something that has not existed for 3 centuries. A Draconis family." Valeria's voice held a note of amazement. "The twins would be bound to you as surely as they are to me, and you to them. The relationship is permanent." Marcus thought about his life back on Earth. The mining contracts, the solitary existence, the constant search for something more meaningful than quarterly profit reports. Then he looked at the two young dragons who had somehow chosen him out of all the possible beings in the universe. "What are their names?" he asked. Valeria's expression seemed to soften, though with her alien features it was hard to be certain. "They have not yet chosen names for themselves. That is part of the bonding process. They will reveal their true names only to their chosen family." The smaller dragon was now also touching the habitat wall, both of them making soft chirping sounds that the translator couldn't seem to process. Despite being born in vacuum, they seemed to understand that Marcus was inside the pressurized environment. "If I go out there," Marcus said carefully, "what happens?" "The bond will complete itself. You will be able to sense their emotions and general location, and they yours. In time, you may even be able to communicate without words. But Marcus, this is not a decision to make lightly. Draconis bonds have been known to last for millennia. Marcus looked at his hands, still encased in his EVA gloves, then back at the two young dragons waiting patiently outside. He thought about the loneliness of the past 3 weeks, the emptiness of his mining surveys, and the way both young dragons were looking at him with such trust and hope. Will they be able to survive in normal atmosphere? I mean, if I take them with me? Draconis are remarkably adaptable, Valeria assured him. They can survive in vacuum, but they can also thrive in atmospheric environments, though they will need to feed soon. What do baby dragons eat? In the wild, they would consume mineral-rich asteroids and absorb stellar radiation, but they can also digest most organic compounds. The real question is whether your ship can accommodate passengers of their eventual size. Marcus had a sudden vision of trying to explain 2 full-grown dragons to the mining corporation back on Earth. The thought was both terrifying and oddly appealing. I guess we'll figure that out when we get there, he said, moving toward the habitat's airlock. First things first, let's see if these little ones actually want to go with a crazy human. Marcus, Valeria called as he began the depressurization sequence. I need you to understand something. This bond, if you accept it, will change you as well. Humans who have been touched by Draconis magic are never quite the same. Magic? Call it what you will. The universe has ways of connecting certain beings across species lines. My children would not have chosen you if you were not somehow compatible with our nature. The airlock cycled, and Marcus stepped out into the vacuum of the hollow. His suit's systems immediately began compensating for the lack of atmosphere, but he could still feel the cold trying to seep through his thermal layers. The 2 young dragons moved toward him immediately, their movements graceful despite their obvious inexperience with walking. The larger one reached him first, standing up on its hind legs to place both front claws against his chest plate. The moment of contact was electric. Marcus felt a rush of emotion that wasn't his own. Curiosity, warmth, and an overwhelming sense of rightness. Images flashed through his mind, soaring through nebulae, the taste of solar wind, and a deep instinctive knowledge of stellar navigation. The second dragon joined its sibling and the sensations doubled. Marcus could suddenly sense their distinct personalities. The larger one was bold and adventurous, while the smaller was more cautious but deeply empathetic. I can feel them, Marcus said in wonder, his voice carried by the suit's comm system. They're so aware. The bond is forming, Valeria confirmed. Do you accept their choice, Marcus of Earth? Will you be guardian and family to Astra and Cosmos, last children of the Draconis? Marcus looked down at the 2 young dragons, who were now climbing up his suit with obvious delight. Astra, the larger, bolder one, had managed to reach his shoulder and was nuzzling against his helmet. Cosmos remained at chest level, but Marcus could feel the smaller dragon's contentment through their growing connection. Astra and Cosmos, he repeated, tasting the names. They felt right somehow. Yes, Valeria. I accept their choice. I'll protect them and care for them as best I can. The moment he spoke the words, Marcus felt something fundamental shift inside him. The bond snapped into place like the final piece of a puzzle he hadn't known he was solving. Suddenly, he could sense the twins' exact locations even with his eyes closed, and their emotional states were as clear to him as his own. More surprisingly, he could feel Valeria's presence as well, a warm, maternal glow that spoke of ancient wisdom and deep gratitude. It is done, she said, and Marcus thought he detected tears in her voice. The first interspecies Draconis bond in recorded history. You are now part of something larger than yourself, Marcus. The twins will grow strong under your guidance, and perhaps the Draconis need not fade into legend after all. As if to emphasize her point, both Astra and Cosmos began to glow more brightly, their scales taking on some of the same stellar fire that burned in their mother's eyes. Marcus realized that he, too, was beginning to feel different, more aware of the cosmic forces around him, more attuned to the subtle energies that flowed between stars. The bond was changing him, just as Valeria had warned. But as he looked down at the two young dragons who had chosen him as their family, Marcus found that he didn't mind the transformation at all. For the first time in his adult life, he felt like he belonged somewhere. The question now was what the three of them were going to do next. 3 days after the bonding, Marcus was beginning to understand why most dragon guardians were probably dragons themselves. Astra and Cosmos were growing at an alarming rate. What had started as cat-sized hatchlings were now the size of large dogs, and their appetites were keeping pace with their growth. The Wanderer's food stores, designed to keep one human fed for 6 months, were being depleted at an exponential rate. Okay, Marcus said, watching Cosmos devour the last of his emergency protein bars with obvious enjoyment. I get it, you're hungry, but that was supposed to last me 2 weeks. Through their bond, he could sense the young dragon's apologetic embarrassment mixed with lingering hunger. Astra, meanwhile, was investigating the ship's mineral processing unit with intense curiosity, her claws leaving scratches in the titanium housing. No. Astra, Marcus said firmly. That's not food. That's how we stay alive in space. The Boulder twin looked at him with glowing eyes that somehow managed to convey both innocence and mischief. Through the bond, Marcus felt her counter-argument. If it was made of metal, and dragons ate metal-rich asteroids, why couldn't she at least taste it? Because, Marcus said, realizing he was arguing with a 3-day-old dragon about ship safety. If you break that, we all die. Very simply, no air, no heat, no life. Astra backed away from the processor, but Marcus could sense her filing the information away for future consideration. The twins learned frightfully fast, another trait that was both amazing and terrifying in equal measure. Valeria had been recovering in the asteroid hollow, her wing injuries healing with typical Draconis resilience. But she was due to join them on the ship soon, which would create an entirely new set of problems. The Wanderer simply wasn't designed to accommodate a 30-meter dragon, no matter how cooperative she was. The communication console chimed, indicating an incoming message. Marcus frowned. He wasn't expecting any transmissions way out here in the belt. His mining contract didn't require regular check-ins for another week. The message was tagged with a priority code he'd never seen before. Galactic Council Emergency Protocol. That can't be good, Marcus muttered, accepting the transmission. The holographic display activated, revealing a figure that made Marcus's stomach drop. Admiral Korath of the Hegemony Fleet was a Krillian, one of the insectoid species that dominated the military arm of the Galactic Council. He was also notorious for his rigid adherence to regulations and his particular dislike of humans, whom he considered dangerously unpredictable. Human designation Marcus Chen, Korath began without preamble, his translation rendering his clicks and hisses into clipped, formal English. You are hereby ordered to maintain your current position and prepare for immediate inspection. Council intelligence has detected unauthorized Draconis energy signatures originating from your location. The transmission cut off, leaving Marcus staring at the blank display. Through the bond, he could sense both twins' sudden alertness. They might be young, but their instincts were telling them that this wasn't good news. Unauthorized Draconis energy signatures, Marcus repeated. I guess they can detect the bond from long range. He activated the communication link to the hollow where Valeria was resting. Valeria, we've got company coming. The Galactic Council detected you somehow. I feared this might happen. Valeria's voice carried a note of weary resignation. The twins' bonding process released a considerable amount of temporal spatial energy. Any civilization with sophisticated sensors would have noticed the signature. Is that bad? The Draconis have been officially extinct for 3 centuries, Marcus. Our reappearance will cause complications. Before Marcus could ask what kind of complications, his proximity sensors began screaming. A massive shape dropped out of hyperspace directly above the asteroid field, a hegemony dreadnought. Bristling with weapons and easily 50 times the size of his small mining ship. The twins moved immediately to his sides, Astra on his left and Cosmos on his right. Even at their young age, they seemed to understand that this was a threat. Marcus could feel their tension through the bond, along with something else, a growing heat that seemed to come from deep inside their small bodies. "Oh no," he said, realizing what was happening. "Guys, I need you to stay calm. Whatever you're feeling right now, don't do it." But it was too late. Both twins opened their mouths and released miniature streams of what could only be described as concentrated starlight. The beams struck the bulkhead behind Marcus's pilot chair, instantly vaporizing a section of titanium steel composite. "Okay," Marcus said shakily. Note to self, baby dragons can breathe stellar fire. Good to know. The communication console chimed again, this time with an emergency override signal. Admiral Korath's image appeared, but his expression had shifted from bureaucratic annoyance to something approaching shock. "Human Chen," he said slowly, "did our sensors detect correctly? Are you harboring living Draconis specimens?" Marcus looked at the twins, who were staring at the hologram with obvious interest. He could feel their curiosity through the bond, along with a growing sense of protective aggression that was probably directed at the alien admiral. "Define harboring," Marcus said carefully. "Do not attempt humor with me, human. The Draconis extinction accords were signed by all council species 3 centuries ago. Any surviving specimens are to be immediately remanded to council custody for study and—" "Study?" Marcus interrupted, his own protective instincts flaring. "These aren't specimens, Admiral. They're children." Through the bond, he felt both twins react to his emotional spike. Astra moved closer to his chair, while Cosmos positioned himself near the ship's control console. They were preparing to defend him, Marcus realized with a mixture of pride and terror. "The emotional state of the specimens is irrelevant," Korath continued. "Council Directive 7742 states clearly that any discovery of extinct species must be reported immediately to the Xenobiology Department for—" The Admiral's words cut off as Valeria's voice suddenly filled the communication channel. "Admiral Korath of the 3rd Battle Group," she said, her tone carrying an authority that made the ship's hull vibrate slightly. "I am Valeria of the High Peaks clan, last daughter of the Draconis Council. By what right do you claim jurisdiction over my children?" The silence that followed was so complete that Marcus could hear his own heartbeat. On the hologram, Korath's compound eyes were focused on something off-screen, presumably a scan reading that was confirming Valeria's identity. "That is impossible," the Admiral said finally. "The Draconis Council was dissolved after the War of the Burning Void. No member of that body has been confirmed alive for over 200 years. "Yet here I am," Valeria replied calmly. "And here are my children, born free and bonded according to the ancient ways. They are not specimens to be studied, Admiral. They are citizens of the galaxy with rights that predate your council's authority." Marcus watched the hologram flicker as competing signals fought for control of the communication channel. He could sense both twins' growing agitation through the bond. They might not understand the politics, but they could feel the tension in the air. "The hegemony does not recognize any authority predating council law," Korath said, but there was less certainty in his voice now. "However, the matter of legal precedent is complex. I am ordering a full diplomatic review before taking any action." "How generous of you," Valeria said dryly. "And during this review, you intend to leave my family in peace?" "The specimens will remain under quarantine pending—" "They have names, Admiral," Marcus interrupted, surprising himself with his own boldness. Astra and Cosmos. They're not specimens. They're not property. And they're not going anywhere without their family's consent. Korath's attention shifted back to Marcus, and the Krillian's expression became even more incredulous. Human. Are you claiming some form of legal standing in this matter? I'm claiming parental rights, Marcus said, the words coming out more confidently than he felt. The twins have bonded with me according to Draconis tradition. That makes me their guardian under any legal system that recognizes interspecies family structures. Through the bond, he felt both twins' surprise and pride. Astra nuzzled against his arm while Cosmos chirped something that the universal translator couldn't interpret, but which felt like approval. Interspecies family structures are not recognized under current council law, Korath stated. But they are recognized under Draconis law, Valeria interjected, which predates council authority by several millennia. The twins have chosen their guardian according to our most sacred traditions. To separate them now would be considered an act of war against the Draconis people. There are no Draconis people, Korath's composure finally cracked. Your species is extinct. You cannot declare war when you consist of 3 individuals and 1 human. Marcus felt something shift in the bond, a sudden deep anger that seemed to come from both twins simultaneously. The temperature in his ship began to rise, and he could see their scales starting to glow more brightly. Guys, he said softly, placing a hand on each of their heads. Easy. We're not fighting yet. The contact helped calm them, but Marcus could still feel their readiness for violence humming just beneath the surface. For 3-day-old dragons, they had remarkably strong opinions about threats to their family. Admiral, Valeria said, her voice carrying a subtle warning, you are discussing the genocide of my people in front of my children. I suggest you choose your next words very carefully. On the hologram, Korath appeared to be consulting with someone off-screen. Marcus could hear the rapid clicking and chittering of multiple Krillian voices, though the translator wasn't picking up their conversation. Finally, the Admiral returned his attention to the communication. The matter has been referred to the Council's Xenocultural Affairs Committee, he announced. A full diplomatic team will arrive within the standard week to assess the situation and determine proper jurisdiction. A week, Marcus repeated, and until then, you will remain in your current location under hegemony observation. Any attempt to leave the asteroid field will be considered an act of aggression. The transmission cut off, leaving Marcus alone with 2 increasingly restless young dragons and a growing sense that his life had just become impossibly complicated. Valeria, he called through the comm link, please tell me you have some idea how to handle this. I have been away from galactic politics for 3 centuries, Marcus, she replied, but I suspect the situation is more complex than Admiral Korath realizes. The return of the Draconis will have implications far beyond simple xenobiology. Marcus looked at Astra and Cosmos, who were now engaged in what appeared to be a heated discussion conducted entirely through chirps, growls, and the occasional small burst of stellar fire. Even without understanding their exact words, he could sense their topic through the bond. They were planning something. What kind of implications? He asked. The Draconis were not simply another species, Marcus. We were the first to achieve true stellar consciousness, the ability to perceive and interact with the fundamental forces that govern the universe. Our extinction was not accidental. A chill ran down Marcus's spine. Someone deliberately wiped out your people? The War of the Burning Void was officially a territorial dispute between the Draconis and several younger species who felt we were monopolizing the best stellar real estate. In reality, it was about fear. Fear of what we represented and fear of what we might become. Marcus watched the twins, who had apparently reached some kind of agreement and were now approaching his pilot chair with determined expressions. And now there are more of you again. 3 more, Valeria corrected. But with something that has never existed before, a human bonded to Draconis young. The political implications are staggering. Why? What's so special about humans? Your species has only recently achieved interstellar travel, yet you have already demonstrated remarkable adaptability and resilience. More importantly, humans seem uniquely capable of forming meaningful bonds across species lines. Most galactic races remain insular, trading and communicating but never truly connecting. Astra had climbed into Marcus's lap and was staring directly into his eyes. Through the bond, he could sense her trying to communicate something urgent, but the concepts were too complex for their developing connection to handle. "What is it, Astra?" he asked gently. The young dragon placed one claw against his chest, directly over his heart, and Marcus suddenly felt a rush of images and sensations that weren't his own. He saw the hegemony dreadnought from outside, its weapons systems charging. He felt the cold touch of hostile intent from the ship's crew. Most importantly, he sensed something else approaching from deeper in the asteroid field. Multiple somethings moving fast and staying just outside sensor range. "We're about to have more company," he announced grimly. Before Valeria could respond, the proximity alarms began screaming again. This time, however, the contacts weren't coming from hyperspace. They were emerging from the asteroid field itself, where they had apparently been hiding in the sensor shadows of the larger rocks. Marcus counted 12 ships, sleek, predatory designs that he didn't recognize from any Council fleet. Their hulls seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, giving them an ominous, almost living appearance. The communication console activated without his input, displaying a symbol that made both twins suddenly go very still. It was a stylized dragon's head surrounded by 7 stars, the ancient crest of the Draconis High Command. "Impossible," Valeria whispered. "That symbol should not exist." The new transmission began, and Marcus found himself looking at a humanoid figure in dark armor that seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal. But it was the eyes that caught his attention. They glowed with the same stellar fire as Valeria and the twins. "Sister Valeria," the figure said, its voice carrying harmonics that made Marcus's bones vibrate. "You have been found at last. The Draconis remnant greets you and congratulates you on your remarkable choice of guardian." Marcus felt both twins press closer to him as the full implications of the situation began to dawn on him. The Draconis weren't extinct after all. They had been hiding, waiting, and watching. And somehow, his bond with Astra and Cosmos had just pulled him into the center of what was beginning to look like a very old, very complex game. "Who are you?" Marcus asked, though he was already beginning to suspect he didn't want to know the answer. "I am Commander Zephyr of the Void Fleet," the figure replied, turning its glowing gaze directly toward Marcus. "And you, Guardian Marcus, have just become the most important human in galactic history." Outside his small ship, 12 dark vessels moved into formation around the hegemony dreadnought. The war of the burning void, it seemed, was about to reignite, and Marcus Chen, small-time asteroid miner, was somehow right in the middle of it all. The standoff lasted exactly 47 minutes. Marcus knew because he spent every one of those minutes watching his chronometer while simultaneously monitoring the growing tension between the hegemony dreadnought and the 12 mysterious Draconis vessels. Through his bond with the twins, he could feel their excitement and fear in equal measure. They sensed the presence of their own kind, but they also understood that violence was imminent. "Commander Zephyr," Admiral Korath's voice crackled over the communication channel. "You will identify yourself according to galactic law and submit to immediate inspection. Your vessels are not registered with any recognized fleet." "Galactic law," Zephyr replied, with what might have been amusement, "is a recent invention, Admiral. The Draconis have been traveling between stars since before your people learned to leave their homeworld. We do not recognize the authority of children playing at civilization." Marcus watched the tactical display as weapon systems on both sides began charging. The hegemony ship was massive and heavily armed, but the Draconis vessels moved with a fluid grace that suggested technology far beyond standard council specifications. "This is going to get ugly fast," he muttered. Through the bond, he felt Astra and Cosmos's sudden determination. Both twins moved to the communication console, somehow managing to activate it despite their lack of hands or any apparent understanding of human technology. "Wait," Cosmos chirped, the universal translator finally managing to process the young dragon's speech. "Fighting is not the answer." "My sibling speaks wisdom," Astra added, her voice carrying an unexpected authority for someone who was barely 4 days old. "Guardian Marcus has shown us a different way." Both adult dragons, Valeria in the asteroid hollow and Zephyr on his command ship, went silent. Marcus could feel their surprise through his developing connection to the broader Draconis consciousness that seemed to link all members of the species. "Little ones," Zephyr said gently, "you do not understand the situation. The hegemony seeks to capture and study you. They view your people as specimens, not as beings with rights." "But Guardian Marcus is human," Cosmos pointed out with irrefutable logic, "and he chose to help us. Perhaps other humans might also choose cooperation over conquest." Marcus felt a sudden pride in the young dragon's reasoning, followed immediately by terror at where this conversation was heading. "Guys, I appreciate the vote of confidence, but I'm not exactly qualified to negotiate interstellar peace treaties." "You are the first human to bond with Draconis young," Valeria said, her voice carrying a note of wonder. "Perhaps that qualification is exactly what we need." Before Marcus could object, Admiral Korath's image appeared on his display again. The Krillian's compound eyes were focused intently on the twins, and his mandibles were clicking in what Marcus was beginning to recognize as extreme agitation. "Human Chen," the Admiral said, "do you have influence over the Draconis vessels?" "This situation is rapidly approaching a critical threshold." Marcus looked at Astra and Cosmos, both of whom were staring at him with expectant expressions. Through the bond, he could sense their absolute confidence in his ability to find a solution. It was both humbling and terrifying. "I might," Marcus admitted, "but I want something in return." "You are hardly in a position to make demands," Korath replied. "Actually, I think I am." Marcus stood up, gently moving the twins to his shoulders where they perched like living jewels. "I'm the only human who can communicate with the Draconis, and apparently the only person in this asteroid field who isn't actively planning to start shooting. That makes me pretty valuable right now." Through the communication link, he could hear Zephyr's crystalline laughter. "The human speaks truth, Admiral. What do you propose, Guardian Marcus?" Marcus took a deep breath, acutely aware that the next few words might determine whether the galaxy descended into war or found a path toward something better. "A cultural exchange," he said. "The Council wants to study the Draconis?" "Fine. But it goes both ways. Draconis representatives get full access to Council databases, technology, and diplomatic processes. The twins stay with me and Valeria, but they serve as living proof that our species can coexist peacefully." "Unacceptable," Korath snapped immediately. "Council security protocols forbid unrestricted access to classified information." "Then we're at an impasse," Marcus said calmly. "Because I'm not letting anyone take Astra and Cosmos away from their family, and I'm pretty sure Commander Zephyr has enough firepower to make that decision stick." "Indeed we do," Zephyr confirmed. "However, the humans' proposal has merit. What specific protocols would you find acceptable, Admiral?" Marcus could see Korath consulting with his staff again, their rapid clicking and chittering creating a background static that the translator couldn't interpret. Finally, the Admiral returned his attention to the negotiation. "Limited access to non-classified databases," he said reluctantly. "Full diplomatic recognition of the Draconis remnant as a sovereign entity. Establishment of formal first contact protocols. And a permanent human liaison to facilitate communication between our species." "I'll do it," Marcus said before anyone could object. "I'll be your liaison." Through the bond, he felt both twins' excitement and approval. They had somehow known this was where the conversation was heading, he realized. Their confidence in his abilities wasn't just emotional support. It was practical recognition that he was uniquely positioned to bridge the gap between two very different civilizations. "Marcus," Valeria said gently, "do you understand what you are volunteering for? This would not be a temporary assignment. Cultural liaison between species can take decades or even centuries." "I understand," Marcus replied, surprised by how certain he felt. "And I accept. Astra and Cosmos chose me as their guardian. That responsibility doesn't end when things get complicated. It means I have to help build a world where they can grow up safely." Zephyr's image shifted, and Marcus caught a glimpse of what appeared to be approval in the alien commander's glowing eyes. The Guardian speaks with wisdom beyond his years. "Very well. The Draconis remnant accepts this proposal, contingent on one additional condition." "Which is?" Korath asked suspiciously. "The human and his bonded charges will have access to Draconis historical records and cultural education. If he is to serve as liaison, he must understand both sides of the relationship he is facilitating." Marcus felt a sudden rush of images through the bond. Glimpses of vast star cities, dragons soaring through nebulae, and technologies that seemed to blend science and art into something approaching magic. The twins were sharing their inherited memories with him, giving him a preview of what he was agreeing to learn. "Acceptable," Korath said after another consultation with his staff, "but the exchange must be supervised by neutral parties. I recommend establishing a joint research station in unclaimed space. The asteroid belt around Kepler 442 is technically unclaimed," Marcus pointed out, "and it already has historical significance for the Draconis. Valeria mentioned that the hollow where the twins were born was carved by her people as a way station." "One of many," Zephyr added. "This entire system was once a major hub for Draconis civilization. The way stations could be restored and expanded into a proper diplomatic facility." Through the bond, Marcus felt both twins practically vibrating with excitement. The idea of rebuilding their ancestral home appealed to them on a level deeper than conscious thought. "A joint colony," Marcus said, the idea taking shape as he spoke. "Draconis and Council species working together to restore the way station network. It would be proof of concept for long-term cooperation." "And you would oversee this project?" Korath asked. "I would facilitate it," Marcus corrected. "The actual oversight would need to come from people much smarter than me. But yes, I'd be the primary contact point between species." Valeria's voice carried clear pride when she spoke again. "The Guardian learns quickly. Very well. The proposal is acceptable to the Draconis Council in exile. We will begin transferring resources to restore the Kepler 442 way station network immediately." Marcus felt a moment of vertigo as the full implications hit him. 3 weeks ago, he had been a lonely asteroid miner, with nothing more significant to worry about than quarterly profit reports. Now he was apparently about to become the cornerstone of an interstellar diplomatic revolution. "There is one more matter to address," Zephyr said, his tone becoming more serious. "Guardian Marcus, the bond you share with the young ones is already stronger than our instruments can easily measure. In time, it will grant you capabilities that no human has ever possessed." "What kind of capabilities?" "Enhanced longevity, for one. The bond extends Draconis lifespans across all participants. You may find yourself aging very slowly for the next several centuries." Marcus looked down at Astra and Cosmos. both of whom were purring in a way that made his chest vibrate. Centuries? At minimum, Valeria confirmed. Draconis bonds are not temporary arrangements. You have committed to being their family until they reach full maturity, which typically takes between 200 and 300 years. Well, Marcus said after a long pause, I guess I'd better start learning how to be a good diplomatic facilitator. This is going to be a long assignment. Through the bond, he felt both twins' amusement at his understatement, along with their absolute contentment with the arrangement. They had chosen well, their emotions seemed to say. Their guardian was already thinking like family. Over the following hour, the three parties worked out the specific details of what was already being called the Kepler Accords. The hegemony would provide construction resources and technological expertise. The Draconis remnant would contribute their advanced understanding of stellar engineering and void space navigation. Marcus would serve as the primary liaison, with the twins acting as cultural ambassadors once they were old enough. This is completely unprecedented, Admiral Korath admitted as the formal agreements were being prepared. A human serving as primary contact between the Council and a species we thought was extinct. The political implications will be significant. Good significant or bad significant? Marcus asked. Unknown significant, the Admiral replied with what might have been Krillian humor. Your species has a remarkable talent for disrupting established patterns. We have learned to expect the unexpected from humans. As the various fleets began moving into position around the asteroid field, Marcus found himself looking out at the stars with new eyes. The universe felt both larger and smaller than it had before. Larger because he was beginning to understand the vast web of civilizations and relationships that connected every inhabited system, but smaller because the bond with Astra and Cosmos made him feel connected to something fundamental and eternal. Are you ready for this? Valeria asked through the communication link. Marcus looked at the twins, who were now engaged in what appeared to be a detailed discussion of the various ship designs visible through the viewport. Even at their young age, they were already showing signs of the technological aptitude that seemed to be bred into the Draconis genome. I don't think anyone could be ready for this, he admitted, but I'm willing to learn. That may be the most human response possible, Zephyr observed. Your people's greatest strength seems to be your willingness to adapt to circumstances beyond your original understanding. Over the following days, as construction crews began arriving to establish the new diplomatic station, Marcus started to understand what the Draconis commander meant. Humans might not be the strongest, smartest, or most technologically advanced species in the galaxy, but they seemed to have a unique talent for building bridges between different ways of thinking. The twins grew rapidly, both in size and intelligence. By the end of the first week, they were capable of holding complex conversations about stellar engineering principles that made Marcus's head hurt. But they also retained a playful curiosity about human culture that delighted the growing research teams. More importantly, other species began taking notice. The idea of interspecies family bonding captured imaginations across the galaxy, and the Kepler 4042 system started receiving diplomatic inquiries from civilizations that had never shown interest in cooperative projects before. You have started something much larger than you realize, Valeria told him one evening as they watched the twins practice their flying in the newly expanded hollow. The galaxy has been divided into isolated species groups for too long. Your bond with Astra and Cosmos proves that cooperation across biological boundaries is not just possible. It can be profound. Marcus watched the twins spiraling through the artificial atmosphere of the hollow, their scales glowing with pure joy. Through the bond, he could feel their happiness and sense their growing understanding of their place in the universe. I just wanted to help a mother in distress, he said. I had no idea it would lead to all this. Perhaps that is exactly why it worked, Valeria replied. You acted from compassion rather than calculation. The twins sensed that in you, and it drew them like nothing else could have. As the months passed and the diplomatic station took shape, Marcus began to understand that his role as cultural liaison was really about something much simpler and more complex than formal negotiations. He was living proof that different species could become family, that the barriers between civilizations were often less absolute than they appeared. The twins, now approaching the size of small shuttles and displaying intelligence that impressed even veteran Draconis scholars, had become symbols of hope for a galaxy that was slowly learning to see past its own limitations. And Marcus Chen, former asteroid miner turned interstellar diplomat, found himself at the center of a transformation that would reshape the political landscape of the galaxy for centuries to come, all because he had been willing to help a stranger in need. And two young dragons had looked at him and decided he was worth choosing as family. It was, he reflected, as he watched Astra and Cosmos teaching a group of young diplomats how to navigate in three-dimensional space, probably the best decision he had ever made.